Me and my friend Kristen went to the beach one day so she could help me film a music video that I was making. She was filming it and I was performing in it. I needed to get a few shots before the summer was ending and school was going to start again. It was a beautiful day out. The sun was shining and there were nice white clouds, but as we started filming, about an hour since the time we got there, the sky started getting a little darker and the clouds started becoming a little more gray. And me and Kristen, we knew that it was supposed to rain, but later in the day, so we were like, all right, I guess the rain's coming now. So we continued to film because it wasn't really bad out, and the gray clouds and the darkness was only on one side of the beach, but the other side, which was more over the ocean, that still looked blue and nice and bright. We continued to film, and the clouds started getting darker and darker on the left side of us. And Kristen was saying, we probably should go. And I kept saying, all right, we will, but we got to get this last shot. And the clouds kept getting darker and darker and moving closer and closer towards us. And finally we were like, you know what? I think we better get out of here. It's looking pretty bad. So we packed up our stuff and we walked to the side where my boat was parked. Me and her had driven my boat over from my house. Where my boat was parked was where all the gray clouds and the darkness was. And sadly, the direction of my house was exactly where all the storm looked like it was coming from. And as we started getting into the boat, it started drizzling, and then the rain picked up and got heavier and heavier. And then I was like, all right, we really got to get out of here and get back home. So I plugged the key in to start the engine, and the engine wouldn't go. It didn't even start. I thought, are you kidding me? We're actually going to be stuck here? So I kept trying to start the engine, and it wouldn't go. And I started freaking out, and I was like, what are we supposed to do? So I get my mom on the phone. It's pouring rain. I'm trying to listen to her, but it's so windy, I can barely hear her. And she says, did you turn the battery on? And I shut my phone off. I threw it under the center console to keep it dry, and I turned the battery on, realizing I hadn't had it on the whole time. And I plugged the key in again, and the engine started. Now we're both in the boat. We're driving slow because of the fog, but I keep saying we need to get back as soon as possible because it looks like we're driving right into a storm. I started picking up speed, realizing that we need to get back as soon as possible. And the more speed I picked up, the harder the rain felt, and I thought, it just is feeling harder and stronger because I'm going faster now in the boat. But as we kept going and going, we looked down and realized that the rain that we thought was rain was bouncing off the boat and the windshield in front of us, and we were like, this is hail. The hail was coming down harder and bigger the more and more we went. There was a point that it was coming down so hard that Kristen was like, ow, it's hurting me. And I looked at her leg, and she was having these red blotches from the hail hitting her. So she picked up this cushion and held it up in front of her like a shield to block herself from the hail. And it's even windy, and the fog is starting to become so thick that I can barely even see my cove, and I can barely even see the landmarks that I know to look for my house. All I see is to the right of me, this island. This was the only thing that I could see, was this island to the right of me, and I knew that to the left of that was my house. So I kept driving in that direction, thinking I was getting closer and closer to my house. At this point, I looked down and I realized that the boat itself was filling up with inches of water, and we could feel it on our feet how cold it was because of the previous rain that had filled up the boat. And then now, with the hail coming down and landing in the water, it was making the water absolutely freezing. And Kristen was saying how numb her hands were, and she was worried that her fingers were literally going to break off. We were drenched in water and freezing, and everything felt frozen on our hands and on our feet. And it was honestly at one point really hard to drive, but I just kept holding onto that steering wheel and thinking, you gotta just keep driving and keep driving. And Kristen told me later that day that at one point she looked over at me and the mascara was just dripping down my eyes, and I had the most intense look in my face because of how determined I was to get us through the storm. Then all of a sudden she says to me, Kylie, where's the camera? And I go, what? She said, it's not in the boat. Where is it? And I looked around. I didn't see it anywhere. And I was like, did it fall in the water? Did we leave it on the beach? Where's the camera? And then all of a sudden I think, wait, maybe it's under the center console. So I open it and I realized that it was there. And I was like, oh, all right, at least the camera's here. And then as soon as that relief happened, then we look up, and right in front of us, 2 huge lightning bolts strike. And at this point, I'm thinking, what are we going to do? The direction of my house is literally right in the direction of where these lightning strikes are coming from. And at this point in time, I was so scared. I genuinely thought that we were not going to get back. With the metal boat that we were in, with how we couldn't see anything, we couldn't even see if there were any boats around or anything that could hit us or that we could run into. And how close we were to this lightning was unbelievable. I really had to think on my feet. I had no idea what to do or what was the safest way to go. So I thought, should I maybe pull off and dock the boat on this island and get off and try to take cover here instead of driving on the metal boat? But then I thought, you know what? I think we're halfway home anyway, and we could be stuck on this island for God knows how long. I was so lost and turned around and confused and couldn't see anything except for these buildings that I didn't even recognize. And then finally, I look ahead of me and I see some sort of movement, and I realize that there's a boat. So I drive up and I start talking to these guys on the boat, and I was like, hey, what do we do? What do we do? And these guys are sitting on their boat like, there's no big deal. Nothing crazy is going on. Meanwhile, we're in the midst of this entire storm, and there's no one around besides us and this boat. They were like, oh, I don't know. And as soon as they started to say something, I looked and I saw these 2 black flags that I recognized, and I realized, wait a second, I'm not in my cove, I'm in the next cove over, which happens to be where my Nana lives. And I was like, wait a second, I need to gun it right now because I know where I am, and I'm just going to go to my Nana's house and not even try to get back to my own house. So I barely let these guys finish, and as soon as I recognized where I was, I slammed down the lever and just gunned the engine at a full speed and just followed the flags that I recognized. And I kept going and I kept going, and I realized that at this point, we were actually on the way out of the storm. Ahead of us, the sky was actually getting clearer, so I finally could see and things were becoming less foggy. And finally, I saw my Nana's house, and we were speeding so fast, faster than I've ever driven before. The water felt so airy and light because the tide was so high from this storm and all the rain. And it felt like we were just floating across this water. And it was the most relieving feeling I've ever felt. And at this point, me and Kristen were almost laughing and just shouting, yes, in relief that we had finally gotten out of the storm and we found a way back. And finally, we ended up at my Nana's dock, and we tied the boat onto that dock so fast, and we ran inside and we're like, help, we've been stuck in the storm. And my Nana let us in, and we showered, and we just talked about this experience for 2 hours. And we actually ended up finding out later that the storm that we had been through had been a water spout, which is basically a tornado on the bay. It was just a crazy experience to live through, but once I think about it, it was just perseverance and getting through it, and I'm so happy I had a friend to go through this with, and I wasn't by myself.